Hello there, and thank you for joining us. My name's Leyton Ramskill, and I'm the Student Wellbeing Lead at CIMA. And joining me here today is Amber Cowburn of Working Well. Amber's a consultant, first aid mental health trainer and instructor, and general all-round wellbeing expert. We're holding this session today to celebrate World Wellbeing Week 2022. We know it's quite normal for anybody to feel anxious or even overwhelmed when we're preparing for an exam. Wellbeing is not just mental and emotional fitness. It can be around physical health, financial and social resilience. But today we want to talk to you in particular about mental health in relation to your preparation for your exam and the coping strategies that you can implement to help with that. So Amber, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
To begin with, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and why this area is so important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm Amber Cowburn. I'm a global mental health awareness trainer. So over the last 10 years, I've worked on improving mental health awareness for individuals, for businesses, for communities, in campaigning, in consulting, and in training. And now I run my business Working Well. So in Working Well, I train businesses across the world, and it's all about taking meaningful action for workplace well-being. And that often starts with training the people within those businesses and upskilling them in mental health awareness. So I love to train and upskill and give people that knowledge and those tips and strategies around their own mental health. So in the last 2.5 years, I've trained over 2,000 business people across the world in mental health awareness and strategies, and really encourage them to look after their own mental health, and also to support the people around them and know how to signpost and things like that. I've also given 2 TED Talks, and I do lots of public speaking to really spread this message. I want more people to really understand their mental health and make small changes, because small changes can add up to big differences and big impact. And actually, when we talk about mental health, everybody has mental health, just like they have physical health. But there's such a knowledge gap around mental health because we're not taught it in schools. So we get to adulthood and we often don't know how to look after our own mental health, and only really address it when we're really struggling. So I'm trying to encourage people to do it a long time before that and be as proactive as possible.
Excellent. That sounds good. Fully agree. So perhaps next we can ask you, what are your top tips for handling exam stress or those stressful times towards an exam?
So my top tips around exam stress and revision stress and all of the stresses that come with that, I would start by going right back to the wellbeing basics or the fundamentals and getting those right. So it sounds really simple, but we often overlook those things. Things like nutrition, hydration, sleep, movement, they're really, really important to get ourselves in the best possible kind of physical and mental wellbeing space in order to study and to experience quite high stress levels around something that is stressful for most people. So with nutrition, it's about making sure that your food is fueling you. It's helping fuel your energy. There aren't big slumps because of sugar and things like that. Things like nuts and slow release carbs and stuff like that are really useful in actually fueling our bodies to perform, because our brains actually take a lot of our energy. Then hydration is something we all overlook so much. So many of us, including me, are completely kind of, reaching for the coffee and maybe not the water. And actually, the more water we drink, the better. It really, really helps, especially kind of ice cold water is really, really good for brain focus. And then things like sleep. I know it's hard to sleep when you feel worried or stressed, when you've got stuff going on. It can be really difficult. You can find that you're overthinking, that you're lying there worrying about the things you haven't done, the things you have done. And that's natural. So what we try and do is encourage really good sleep habits, or sleep hygiene routines, we call them, which is the steps you take before you go to sleep that signal to your body it's time to go to sleep now, it's time to wind down. And getting good sleep and rest is so fundamental to your mental health, to your concentration and focus, and to your overall mood. When we're sleep deprived, we don't regulate our emotions well, and we can find ourselves really overreacting to situations because we're not able to process. And then movement as well. And I don't mean this in terms of punishing exercise regimens. We've got enough on our plate. We don't need to add that in. But actually just thinking about movement in small ways, moving regularly throughout the day, moving in ways that is nourishing and fueling. And the more we move our body, actually, we release endorphins in the brain. And we really see the benefits of that in keeping our well-being up, particularly during stressful times. So that can be, a gentle walk, some stretches, some yoga. It doesn't need to be anything that adds stress back into the body, because obviously that could be counterintuitive. And then with kind of revision or study setup, the things I'd say are really key, again, from a basic well-being point of view, are where are you studying? Where are you revising? Have you got access to daylight? Have you got fresh air? Have you got cool air? Maybe you prefer to have a fan on. Do you have a good desk and chair set up? Because we've got to think about your neck and back health. Potentially putting your laptop up onto a stand or having back support, those kind of things. But the key thing, you could have the best kind of study set up in the world. You have to be getting up and taking breaks. You have to be getting up and taking breaks, walking away from your desk, moving your body, and having that kind of mental reset. We only really concentrate for around 35 to 40 minutes at a time in terms of optimum concentration. And after that, it slopes pretty quickly. So the old kind of routines we got ourselves into, the kind of out of date practices where we would just push through, I want to revise for 3 hours in a block, is not conducive to good focus or well-being or quality work. So I always say to people, you need to schedule in those breaks, because they're as important to your success overall as the actual studying you're doing in between the breaks. And if you can get up and move away from your desk, you're also benefiting, your back health, you're benefiting loads of stuff with your physical health, but also your mental health. And particularly if you're feeling very stuck, or a subject's really thrown you and you're starting to spiral in terms of self-confidence, take that break and move away, get some perspective and come back. That is so much more helpful than sitting there and pushing through when you're not making progress. You're just eroding your self-confidence. And then when it comes to revision, the key thing for me and all studying is about planning it. And this is a well-being technique that I talk about in so many different ways. But when we've got something big that we want to achieve, whether that's a goal, an exam, a personal improvement goal, whatever it is, we need to break it down into small steps. Because when we look at big things that we need to achieve, we just feel overwhelmed. And that can completely immobilize us and make us think, I can't do it, I'm cancelling, I'm checking out. And actually, everything is achievable if we break it down into small steps. And I always kind of use the slightly cringy metaphor of, if you're going to climb a mountain, it starts with the first few steps. It is a series of steps. Yes, they are challenging, but if we break them down and just focus on the next step, and manageable small chunks, that is so much more doable. And we get that sense of achievement for each bit that we can, tick off our plan, which is really important for positive reinforcement, for thinking I'm achieving something, I'm making progress. And that comes into mindset. And this isn't about being, relentlessly positive throughout, a tough time. When you're studying for something, when you're going to sit an exam, it is stressful, it is tough, and it is pressured. But if you've got that mindset where you're working on your mindset each day, you're positively reinforcing yourself, you're reassuring yourself you can do this, you're not punishing yourself, you're not talking yourself down. And I always say, if you wouldn't say it to your best friend, don't say it to yourself. You've got to challenge those negative thoughts. And maybe using things like affirmations or starting your day with intention, but using your mindset to actually ensure that you're in a good place mentally in order to do this. And a key thing with mindset is also to not compare. So if engaging with other students or other, friends, people in the same situation, hearing what they're doing in their revision or study, or all the things they've read and all the extra stuff they've made time for, it's not helpful. You need your own track, your own plan, and to try and stick to that.
Understood. Thank you, Amber. I'm sure there was lots of bits there that our students can take away and probably struck a chord. Being a type 1 diabetic, I certainly couldn't agree with you more around the nutrition and the sugar aspect, and how there really are good foods and bad foods for studying. And that's something I've had to learn myself. Thank you. So can you suggest any particular coping strategies which our students might be able to implement for their studies or for their exam time?
Yeah, definitely. So I think if you're feeling very anxious or worried during exam time or during revision time, whether that's literally you walking into an exam or in the build up, then I think it's really important to address that and think about coping strategies that you've got. Now, coping strategies, I always think of it as like a toolbox that you've got to fill up with strategies that work for you. And sometimes you need strategies that are going to relax you and calm you down. So this could be things like uh, mindfulness, meditation. It could be watching TV and chilling out. It could be going for a walk, gently. It could be speaking to a friend or family member. It could be taking a bath, anything that you find relaxing or that brings you down. And genuinely, this is different for everybody. I always say some people's self-care heaven is other people's self-care hell. So pick the things that work for you. There's no right answer. As long as for you they are helpful coping strategies, they're not adding back into your stress. Sometimes we need coping strategies that help empty out our mind a little bit, writing everything down onto a piece of paper, writing all our worries or anxious thoughts down, perhaps making lists and prioritizing things. For some of us, that's really, really helpful, is getting it out of our head and onto paper. And other coping strategies that you might not have thought of are things like using a wellbeing app. There's tons of wellbeing apps out there that are really brilliant in terms of helping you coach your thoughts, helping you relax. Apps like Calm and Headspace and things like that are great for guided relaxations. They can help you get to sleep. Some of them have sleep stories and guided tracks. So there are a whole kind of wealth of things out there that you can use and try, and I would really encourage that. And one thing I would say is that if you're feeling particularly anxious or worried, it's really important you think about your breathing. And I know it sounds like a really minor thing. Like, of course you can breathe. You're here in front of me today. We can all breathe. But actually, a lot of us don't use our breath to its full power. And using your breath can really calm your brain from an anxious state. So if your brain is anxious, you're in your kind of fight or flight state, you're in your high alert. And actually, what happens then is we often hold our breath, we feel short of breath, or we breathe in our chests, very, very shallow, quick breathing. We might even feel like we're hyperventilating or feel a lot of panic. And actually learning to lengthen the exhale of your breath is far more important than anything else, really, because what it does is it engages the parasympathetic nervous system and helps your brain know it's safe and come back down to a calm point. So I'd really encourage, if you've never done it before, look into breathing exercises or just focus on lengthening your exhale. And you can find these on YouTube for free. You can find them on apps like Headspace and Calm, like I just mentioned. Or you can just learn a simple technique like square breathing, which is like count to 4 for your inhale, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. And you imagine it like going round a square. And that visualization is also quite calming. So I know breath work sounds like something that belongs on like a meditation weekend and not in your daily life, but I promise you it's a really useful tool. And especially if you walk into an exam and you feel that panic rising, you feel that anxiety rising, breath work and having those tools in your toolbox is really, really powerful. So I really would encourage that as a good coping strategy. And also movement, like I mentioned before, movement is really, really important. I sometimes say to people, imagine you're shaking the stress out of your body, doing things like movements that are swinging, movements that are shaking, movements that are stretching. You can dance around your kitchen to music, you can do a yoga video, you can go on a walk, whatever works for you. But having that kind of mind-body connection and releasing tension out of the body, we hold our stress and tension in so many parts of our body, is really, really important as well. So I would encourage that as a coping strategy. And finally, but probably most importantly, is speaking to people, speaking to friends, family, people in your work, people in your study groups, your tutors, maybe speaking to CIMA, but having people that you can download to and share with. You don't have to do things entirely on your own. It can be a lot to hold. So actually using the community around you where it will be useful for you to share how you're feeling, and particularly if those feelings are getting worse, share how you're feeling and reach out for that support. And if you don't want to speak to somebody that you know, You could also ring or text or chat with a support organisation, because there are loads available, and they're there if you need somebody, outside of your circle, somebody that you can be anonymous with and share how you're feeling.
Thank you, Amber. Lots of really good stuff there. And as many of our students do study alone from home, again, I'm sure that resonates. We'll add at this point, please recommend our students to join our CIMA Facebook group, where we've got a community of our students talking to each other, exactly as Amber was just talking about there. You perhaps touched on this in the last question, but I wanted to ask about, what does stress really do to the brain? What impact does stress have on people's brains generally?
It has a massive effect. So stress has a massive effect on us in terms of our mental health and in terms of our physical health. And what we know is that long term, any kind of sustained amounts of stress is really, really unhealthy for us and can potentially cause quite a lot of damage. And that's not to scare anybody, into thinking you're doing permanent damage. What that means is that we need to be managing our stress, day to day. And what we need to do is, I would say, with something like an exam or a revision period, where you've got, this build up time, and that in that time there is going to be heightened stress for you. The first thing I think is acknowledging that, knowing that that is a situation that is going to increase your stress and maybe anxiety levels a little bit. And there is pressure there. Now, the key thing is we don't want that to turn into unmanageable stress. And things that we can do to mitigate that and to protect that is make sure that we're having lots of breaks, as I said, in our study time, but also in our general life, making sure that we're making time for leisure, we're making time to switch off. We're making time for the activities that feel good for us, that self-care, because when we are experiencing stress, the hormone cortisol is released, and it's by the brain, and it pumps around the body. And we can actually counter that with what we kind of call feel-good chemicals in the brain. So things like endorphins, serotonin, oxytocin, they're released by really simple activities, things like yoga, gentle exercise, petting your family pet is a big one for oxytocin. It's called the love hormone. So it can be hugs, it can be playing with a puppy, whatever it might be that brings you that kind of joy. But also things like sitting outside in the sun for 10 minutes, that increases our serotonin. It's also really good for vitamin D. Please do wear sun protection. But there's tons of activities and yoga and just things that you enjoy that uplift and nourish you. And maybe look into making sure that they're things that are releasing endorphins, releasing serotonin, to balance that out. But in a really human basic point, just doing some nice things in amongst the revision, the life demands, the work you've got going on, and making sure that you are recharging your battery. Like, imagine you have a battery just like your smartphone or your tablet or your laptop, and you do have to recharge it. And we recharge it through sleep, but we also recharge it through activities that fuel us, that fill us up, that make us feel good. So looking for those short bursts of joy and those activities that feel good for us is really important. It's not light touch. It's not indulgent. It's actually really, really crucial. So I would say really do make time for that. And then just thinking about the brain and that understanding there as well. It's important to understand that when we experience anxiety, a little bit about kind of the neuroscience of that. So when we perceive that there's a threat or a danger or something to be afraid of, it's quite a primal response in our body, the anxious response. So what happens is our autonomic nervous system kicks in and we go to that fight or flight high alert place in our brain. So there's a part of the brain called the amygdala, and it takes over, it takes the reins, and the thinking rational part of our brain freezes, and the primal survival part of our brain kicks in and decides, are we going to fight for survival? Are we going to engage with this, whatever threat or danger it would be? Or are we going to flee to safety? And that's the fight or flight response. Now, obviously, back in primal early humankind times, we're talking about, a bear outside your cave and you've got to decide whether you're going to fight that bear or you're going to run away. Today, I don't think we come into contact with many bears, but there's tons of things in modern life that are anxious stimuluses to us. We exist with so many things going on, not just, your exam stress, but the pressures from work, from family life, world news, all the things that are going on that compete and, make you feel more anxious. So when we go to that state of fight or flight, we start pumping adrenaline around the body, and we see so many physical symptoms. Like anxiety is a full body reaction. It can be that you're sweating, that your heart rate increases, you might feel short of breath, you might feel sick or nauseous, you might have headaches. There's so many symptoms physically. So we know that it's like our whole body engaging, ready for this fight or flight. And what we want to do is neither of those. We want to calm the brain back down to a kind of steady point, so that our, front cortex and the rest of our brain that thinks and processes rationally, our kind of modern day thinking brain, kicks back in, and we can be more clear-headed. And we do this by calming ourselves down, mostly through our breathing. So if you're in a state of heightened anxiety or panic, lengthening that exhale of the breath, calming yourself back down, repeating to yourself that you're okay, maybe using affirmations or reassuring statements if that works for you. But lengthening that exhale is actually engaging the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of the body that relaxes and processes. And it actually tells your brain, you're safe, it's okay, like, let's proceed with a clear mind. And so it's really important, if that's how you're feeling, if you feel that spike of anxiety or that panic, that you use techniques like breathing to bring yourself back down. And also that overall in our life, we're balancing out those situations with those nourishing self-care moments, those feel-good things, those self-care strategies, so that overall we're tipping that balance and saying, our life is not a series of those events. Those events do come, like there are going to be stresses for everybody. It can even be, you go out in your car and somebody is ragey on the roads, or, you have some emails dropping into your inbox late at night that are freaking you out. And it happens for everybody. And it's a very healthy response, but it's learning to be able to manage that response and then overall balance that a little bit better.
Understood. Thank you, Amber. That all makes complete sense, actually. And I'm sure many of our students have had that moment of wanting to run away from the exam hall.
Yeah.
So maybe you should look more at giving advice on breathing techniques in particular. Not all of us will have access to external help or would have reached out for external help in the past. Are there ways that our students can support their own mental health and well-being, perhaps without involving other people if they choose to?
Yeah, definitely. I think, there's 2 points here. So I think looking after your own mental health in general is totally fine. It's something we can all be doing. And I really encourage that. I encourage you to proactively look after your mental health, just like you would your physical health. So to draw that analogy, for your physical health, it might be that you think about your, are you getting enough fruit and vegetables? Are you taking a daily vitamin? Are you getting some exercise in? You might be thinking about those kind of things. Maybe in the winter, you think about ways to protect yourself from cold and flu viruses, or improve your immunity. There are steps we take, and we're actually taught this from quite a young age on how to look after our health and be in good physical health. So for mental health, I would say exactly the same. If we're looking to be in good mental health, if we're looking to kind of proactively improve and maintain good mental health, then daily things we can be doing are checking in with ourselves and improving our self-awareness. So typically people with really positive mental health or good coping skills understand themselves well. They're listening to themselves. They're putting themselves at the top of the priority list for their self-care. They're making time for activities and rest, activities that nourish you and are a source of rest, but they're also making time for sleep and rest. And they're doing some of the things I've talked through, like making sure you have, coping strategies in place that you can pull on. And good mental health is not relentless good mood. Unfortunately, that's unrealistic. It's actually, good mental health is characterized by being able to experience a whole range of emotions and feelings and moods, and being able to engage with a whole load of stressful events from your daily life, and then coming back to a kind of good point for you, a midpoint, if you like, where you can continue to function and be okay. That's actually good mental health. Now, what I would say is that those things you can definitely start doing. A good morning routine is really a really good thing for mental health. Taking some steps in the morning to set up your day and to set up your mindset. checking in with yourself and improving that self-awareness, asking, how are you feeling? Where are you on a scale of mental health, which is something I always teach. What would serve you or help you today? How are you going to make time for yourself today? Those kind of key questions and self-reflection. And also, like I said, maybe using tools like having a wellbeing app on your phone. There's a lot of brilliant apps, like Samvelo is a great one, where it encourages you to check in every day and log how you're feeling and gives you some prompts and encourages you to, deepen your breath and relax for a moment. So we have some really great tools, in our belonging that we can use, and these are often free, and we can call on those and use those as part of our daily routines. And I always say about trying to establish good micro habits, even if it's, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes of self-care a day. That sounds so little. We all have 10 minutes. We do. And actually that adds up to loads. That adds up to a massive impact over the year. But we'll also encourage you to hopefully increase that number the more you do it. So things like that we can all be doing. We can all look after our own mental health in those ways. What I would say, though, is that if you start to feel that you are struggling with your mental health, if you don't feel like you have enough coping strategies, or if you feel like things are getting worse, please do seek help and support, because with your physical health, you wouldn't even think twice about needing to get some support if things were starting to get, they were worrying you, or they're getting quite overwhelming, or you had signs and symptoms that you weren't happy with. You would seek support and help. And this can start with friends and family. It can start with your colleagues. It can start with people you trust around you. But also, please remember that there are support organisations available in every country in the world. There are support organisations that are free, offering mental health advice and support. And of course, there's your healthcare providers. And I really would encourage this. We have this stigma around seeking help for mental health that we don't have for physical health. And it's really important that we do shake that, because if you need that support, the earlier you can get that support, the better. And even if it's, you find out that in your country there's a text line or a phone line that you can ring or you can call, or you can text, sorry, that you do that and you have that chance to communicate and vent how you're feeling. And that in itself is such a powerful step, and it's a tool that is available to us. So I'd really encourage, if you are struggling, please do seek help, please do speak out, and do it early, because the earlier you're in contact with support, the easier it is to help you. So I really would encourage that, and to change that stigma.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important. And it is a journey that I feel the world is on together,
Yeah.
Perhaps all too slowly, but absolutely.
Yeah.
But one final question for you, perhaps just as a bit of a wrap up even. Any final hints or tips to help students watching today, because they're probably busy getting stressed over their next exam period?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I know I've talked loads, we've covered loads of stuff. So just to recap, I would say what's really important is setting yourself up with those good well-being basics, thinking about the real basic ways or foundations of how you're looking after yourself. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you fueling yourself through your nutrition? Are you well hydrated? And are you well supported? Do you feel supported? And if you don't feel supported, if you don't feel like there are people you can share with or vent to or seek help from, then please know that there is tons and tons of help available. We're going to list some of those ways. I know Leyton's got some brilliant stuff that he can direct you to, but there's also support organizations and people you can reach out to. So I really would stress that. And then I would stress those micro habits and tools in your kind of self-care toolbox are really, really important. So having strategies that work for you when you're stressed, either to relax you or to energize you, things that make you feel refueled and recharged. Like I said, recharging your battery is so important. And then in terms of particularly with studying and exams, I think it's about breaking it down, making a good revision plan or study plan, making it actually achievable, things that you can do in the time you've got. Don't set yourself up for failure saying, when I get home from work, I'm going to do 5 hours of revision into the night. It's not a good tactic. Yeah, we need small, manageable chunks. We need regular breaks. And sometimes I think there's the tendency to think, I'll cram into the night and get this done. I would really challenge you to think, is that time better spent me doing that, or me getting some rest, or decompressing, or, you know, doing something that helps my well-being, and getting that balance. We all want to work hard and study hard and achieve things, and I trust me, I do too, but actually productivity is always better, our focus is always improved, and our standard of work is always better if we're in a better place with our mental well-being. So we really have to take that kinder approach, reassuring ourselves, I can do this, affirmations, believing in yourself, and trying to improve that positive mindset, but also doing it really, really, you know, objectively, really operationally, making it so that you've got the best possible conditions to do this, and remembering that you're in control. You've got this in the bag, and you will get there through a series of small steps. But doing that from, you know, a mentally well point of view is really, really important.
Thank you. Thanks again, Amber. I'm sure there was so much of what you just said across all of your answers there will be helpful to our students. Just like to remind everybody that CIMA is also here to help you. And as Amber's mentioned, we've got a wellbeing tab within the study planner. You can find that by entering planner.cimaglobal.com and looking in the top right where you'll find the wellbeing tab. Within that, there is also a signposting section. Unfortunately, we haven't covered every country on the world yet. It's still a growing list, but we've got major mental health wellbeing charities that you can reach out to if you need to, alongside many other useful articles and content. If you've got any questions or comments about today's presentation, please feel free to drop them in the comments box and we can look at those later. And then really just like to say thanks again. Thank you all for joining us today, and all the best from Amber and myself. Thank you.